Oh, well, good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all well. I'm just going to change my camera, which I neglected to do there. There we go. Well, welcome back, everyone. And we are on to session 2 on Saturday, the 17th of October of our Whiskey Festival in a Box. And I'm delighted to welcome all the lovely people that you see on the screen. Lots of good old and new friends who are going to present their whiskies to you. Hopefully you've got the tasting pack to accompany this Asian whiskey tasting. If not, you'll just have to imagine or go and buy some quickly. But anyway, without further ado, I'm going to bring in our first guest. We'll say goodbye to the others until it's their turn. So goodbye for now. I removed myself last time, which was a bit daft. Good. Okay, David, there you are.
Eddie, thank you very much.
We meet again.
I know, it's been so long. I've been missing you desperately.
I can well imagine. So David, listen, possibly of all the presenters this weekend, you've got the biggest workload, simply because the company you work for owns so many fabulous distilleries and brands. So, it's an embarrassment of riches in a way. And we're very excited to have you talk about Suntory for this session, and in particular the Cheetah. So I'm going to let you introduce the Suntory and what Cheetah is, because obviously people are aware of Yamazaki and Hakushu, but possibly not the Cheetah. So I will not eat up any more of your time for now. I'll let you crack on, and then we'll have a little chat just before you finish, okay?
Eddie, that's great. Thank you. So, those of you who are just joining, my name's David. I work for the snappily titled Edrington Beam Suntory, Edrington Beam Suntory Sales Marketing and Distribution.com Limited. We have the longest, widest business cards in the world. Eddie's touched on the fact that as a company, I am truly lucky to work with such a range of amazing whiskies, these Japanese whiskies in the portfolio, the Yamazaki, Hakushu, Hibiki, Cheetah, the bourbons, Maker's Mark, Knob Creek, the Jim Beam family, Booker's, Baker's, single malt scotches from Lefroy and Bowmore and Isla, Highland Park, Auchentoshan. It's a joy, it really is, to be able to work with so many great whiskies. And what I have today is one of the unsung heroes, maybe, from our portfolio. So it is the Cheetah, and it is unusual in other ways as well. It is a single grain whiskey, and while this is not unique in any way, of course not, but we don't often get the chance to drink grain whiskey on its own. So it feels quite fitting as well that I'm up first on this little session, because the Cheetah, this is the core of all the Beam Suntory blended whiskies. So Toki, but in particular, with Hibiki, Hibiki has got the Yamazaki that goes into it. It's got some Hakushu, but Cheetah is at its absolute heart. And if you don't drink every last drop of the single malts that are coming up after this, maybe at home you should do your own little blending experiment around the core of Cheetah and see what you can come up with using some of these other single malts. You could well come up with something really quite interesting, and the chances are you will probably come up with something which just reinforces just how skillful and how talented the master blenders and the whiskey makers around the world really are. So Cheetah, as a distillery, Cheetah was built in 1972. So Suntory, our first distillery, the Yamazaki distillery, that opened in 1923. Our other malt distillery, Hakushu, opened in 1973. So this came just before that. And it's probably true to say, and I'm sure that both Nathan and Steph will jump on this one. We were playing catch up with Nika. They had opened a grain distillery a year or so previously. Prior to that, basically we were just buying in grain neutral spirit to make our blended whiskey with. So where Nika led, we followed, but it gave us the control over the grain element of our blended whiskies. And that has been the driving force behind Cheetah. You know, we never really intended to be selling it as a single grain whiskey. It is the backbone of all of the blends that Suntory produce. But because it is really rather interesting as a grain whiskey, it was without doubt worthwhile bottling it, getting it out there, giving people an opportunity and a chance to try a grain whiskey and to see how good grain whiskey can be. Now, there are some amazing grain whiskies out there, and some of the things that Compass Box have done over the years. You look at some of the really old grain whiskies that some of the independents are putting out there. You know, it can be absolutely wonderful liquid. But this is Cheetah as it is at the core of our blends, and it is still a complex whiskey. It is not the most complex whiskey in the world. It's not trying to be. It's not the most flavoursome whiskey in the world. It's not trying to. But the role that it plays is vital, and it needs to have that depth and complexity behind it if it is going to be able to hold up its head almost and be proud of being the supporting element in those brilliant blended whiskies. So what do we do? How do we make a really interesting grain whiskey? Well, one of the main influences on Cheetah's flavor profile, and in particular on its mouthfeel, it is produced by continuous distillation, but at the distillery I'm going to say what we did was we had fairly traditional column stills, and we cut them in half so that they are smaller. Now that's obviously gloriously oversimplifying what happened and also revealing that frankly I know nothing about engineering. But we by having shorter column stills, what we are able to do is that we run the distillation for different lengths of time, or we repeat it. So we have 3 different styles of new make spirit that's coming off the stills. If we just do a continuous distillation and we run it twice, we get a much sort of heavier new make spirit, which has a bit more, slightly more, sort of chocolatey, darker influence there. But we also run some of the new make spirit. We do a triple distillation through the stills, so we get a lighter, slightly more floral new make spirit, and some of it we do it 4 times through the stills, so we get a much purer, much lighter new make spirit, and then we still also use the full range of casks that are available to the Suntory distilleries. So although this will predominantly be bourbon barrel influence, there are sherry casks and European oak sherry casks going into this. There is some virgin oak influence going into this. I believe, I was asking questions, and I believe that there is a little bit of even of some Mizunara cask going into the Cheetah here. We do use all of our casks. Now, this will be, this is seasoning almost that we're adding into the equation here. There's not going to be a big influence, but as with seasoning in your food, you kind of like notice it when it's not there as much as when it is, if you get it right. And it is another means by which we are able to give you a grain whiskey that has a really interesting flavor profile. It is not just the skeleton on which we then build the other blended whiskey. And again, I am now going to hypothesize a bit. I'm going to, well, by which I mean I'm going to guess around here. Mizunara influence doesn't come through until you've been aging in a Mizunara cask for quite a long period of time. You probably need 16, 17, 18 years. So we certainly don't do anything as a finish. So the Mizunara influence means that there will be some whiskey going into this that has considerable age behind it. Like I said, I don't want to overplay this because it is going to be a tiny amount of the overall picture here, but some of it will have that extra maturity, giving us this complexity that we're going to be looking for here, and just helping to elevate the liquid that little bit more. There is no age statement on this, so unashamedly, proudly, quite a lot of the liquid going to this will be much younger, and quite rightly so. But we do, I think I should stop talking about it now and actually pour some into a glass. It's been bottled at 43% ABV, so we do give it that little extra boost there. Just looking at the color of the liquid, you would assume a lot of American oak influence. You would assume, for the most part, quite young whiskey going into this. Just gloriously welcoming, lots of caramel, lots of vanilla going on here. Getting a little bit deeper, some of the definitely a little bit of citrus coming through on this as well. Eddie, you're joining me just as we're about to have a drink, have a sip of it. I'm delighted.
Well, to be honest, I've been sipping away already, I'm afraid, but you know, that's such is my want. It's interesting, actually. I was tasting it with varying amounts of water, and it just wasn't quite hitting the spot for me, which is unusual because normally, I must admit, I do add water to whiskey, which I think is generally the right thing to do. But if that's the way you like to do it, but I have to say, with the Cheetah, I actually find it better neat. I think there's an intensity. I think that small amount of Mizunara that you're talking about, the Japanese oak, I think it comes through at full strength, but not necessarily.
Yeah, I think there is truth in what you say there, and sipping it, you get the that slight dryness coming through. Maybe the very apparent sweetness on the nose is much more balanced when you taste it, and I mean, obviously, I would never disagree with you on anything whiskey based because you know more than me. But I would also maybe recommend almost going to the other extreme with the water. That sipping it like this, what a pleasant way to spend the middle of your afternoon. But if you're looking for a sort of a longer, more refreshing serve, to go down the highball route using Cheetah, tall glass. Some beautifully hand sculpted carved piece of ice, or failing that, just get some ice cubes from your freezer, and topping up with I'm going to say lightly carbonated soda water, but get your soda stream out. Soda water of choice, but this will be the base of a really refreshing, great tasting highball. So
I think, David, sorry, you have just sorted my my evening out, because I think I was thinking about what am I going to do when I finally get home, and I really I want something refreshing after a longish drive, and I think a highball with the well, maybe with each of these actually one at a time, and just I'll tell you my results later, tomorrow when I can't move.
I look forward to hearing it, but yeah, I don't think 1 or 2 drops of water, Eddie, is not the solution. You either go full out.
Yeah,
do a highball or no water whatsoever.
I think you're onto something there, David. Listen, that was great. Really good start. Love the Cheetah. I must admit, I haven't tried it for a very long time, so it's another another pleasure to be able to try it today. So, and thank you for giving us a really good explanation of what it is and why it is. And we'll get you back in later on, I promise.
Absolute pleasure, Eddie. Thank you very much. Let's hand over to those people from Nika now, shall we?
We're all good friends here. We're all good friends here. And Nathan's a lot bigger than you, so watch it. Right, I'm going to bring you in, Nathan. Nathan, my friend, how are you doing?
Hello. I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. Your beard is looking pretty luxurious, I must admit.
It's the lockdown beard. You know how it is.
I've shaved mine off twice, actually, Nathan, and I think it's rebelling because it doesn't seem to be growing anymore.
I mean, mine is it's definitely not going to be shaved off. I've got quite a small face, so you have to highlight the attributes, and especially in the whiskey industry, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, listen, I know you've got a lot to talk about. It's very exciting to have not one but two Japanese whiskies on a tasting, which these days is quite rare. And Miyagi Kyo is among my favorite Japanese single malts as well. So I'm very excited to taste it once more. But I'm going to leave you to have a chat through it. I think I can see you've got a presentation.
Yeah, that'd be great if you could share that for me as well.
Share that now, or?
Yes, please. That'd be great.
Okay, so there you go.
Perfect.
And I will come out.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Nathan. I look after Nika in the UK alongside my colleague Steph, who will be talking to you a little bit more about Kavalan later on. So we've just heard from David at Suntory. Now, if you know anything about Japanese whiskey or you're interested in Japanese whiskey, you'll know that there's two real
Oh, are we still there? It seems like we might have lost. But everyone's gone still. I think we might have lost Nathan, unfortunately. Let me see. Nathan seems to have frozen for the second. Steph, maybe we can ask you to take over for a minute, just while we try and get back to Nathan, if you wouldn't mind. Can you hear me, Steph? Oh, hold on.
Same time. So I'm happy to carry on. If that's okay. So
yeah, Nathan... I think until we get Nathan back, I think if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, no worries. I've got the presentation as well, so I can get it shared too. So as Nathan was just mentioning, if you're into your Japanese whiskey, you'll probably have heard of the two big figures, and David was talking about Shinjiro earlier. Oh, have we got him back?
I think we've got him back. Nathan, are you there?
Sorry about that. I think my internet's just gone down at the absolute perfect moment. So I think I'm logged back in now. Sorry about that. Am I back on, Eddie? Have you got me?
Yeah, I've got you, and I've got your... Oh, where is it gone? There we go. Right,
perfect. Sorry about that, everyone. Like Steph and I was saying, two big companies in Japanese whiskey. You got Suntory and Nika. Now, the history of Japanese whiskey is quite complex. I'm going to focus on the Nika side of it. So Nika was founded by this gentleman here. This is Masataka Taketsuru. Now, he was born in 1894 into a family of sake makers. So from a really young age, he was producing alcohol, he was tasting alcohol, and he was really, really good at making his family's sake. He was so good, in fact, that his family decided that he was going to take over the family business instead of his elder brother, which was quite a big deal in Japan. So Taketsuru went to Osaka to study chemistry at university, and he started working for a company called Setsu Shuzo. Now, Setsu Shuzo were a fairly big importer of Western spirits and liquors, but they were also a sake producer and a shochu producer as well. So they had this idea that they wanted to start producing Western-style alcohol in Japan, and Taketsuru was fascinated by all of these different spirits that he saw coming over. So things like the gins, the rums, the vodkas, the sherries, and especially the whiskey coming into Japan, it was unlike anything that the Japanese had seen at the time. So Taketsuru fell in love with this, and he decided that he was going to go to Scotland to learn how to produce this spirit. So this is a really cool photo of Taketsuru, and it's actually at the Miyagi-Kyo distillery. If you ever get to visit that part of Japan, I would highly recommend it. Probably not in the current climate, but this photo is obviously a picture of Taketsuru, and it's titled Taketsuru Arrives in Scotland. Now, you might be able to see a few issues with that. That is the Palace of Westminster just behind, and Big Ben in the distance. But this is showing Taketsuru when he first arrives in the UK.
Uh-oh. Has it happened again? Okay, I'm really sorry about this, folks. But obviously, this is a hazard of doing online stuff. I will bring Steph back in.
Hi. Yes.
Yeah, we're back again.
I'm back.
Oh, we're back
So,
again, right?
Whenever I come
Sorry
on
about that.
screen.
So yeah, Taketsuru has got to Glasgow University, and he starts learning all about distillation of different grains. He learns about all of the fermentation of barley and all about the production of something from a grain base, whereas he'd learned everything from a rice base before. So organic chemistry is what he started studying at Glasgow University. But he also started looking at which distilleries he wanted to work at to get some real-world experience. So the first distillery was one called Longmorn, up in the northeast of Scotland in Speyside. Now, Longmorn is known the world over as one of the key malts that go into Chivas. So this is quite a honeyed, sherried style single malt, very much in that classic Speyside style. So Taketsuru spent some time up there learning that style of whiskey production. He then came down to a distillery called James Calder at Bowness. Now, this was quite an interesting distillery because it used the coffee stills. So it was a grain distillery where Taketsuru learned how to produce all of this different grain whiskey on the coffee stills, which is what Nika still use today. And he also then went over to Campbellton, and he learned to distill a more kind of robust, oily style of spirit at Hazelburn. Now, Hazelburn was also one of the biggest blending halls in Scotland at the time. Now, we see blended whiskey these days, especially in the UK, as almost a subpar product in comparison to its single malts. But if we go back 100 years or more, these blends were king. They were this mark of quality. They were consistent, which is the main aim in a lot of whiskey producing these days. And they were seen as, you know, if you were educated and wealthy, you would buy the blends because of this kind of prestige that they had. So Taketsuru still very much views, or Nika very much viewed that as the style of whiskey today. So in Japan, it's all about blending. So Taketsuru had worked at 3 different styles of distilleries. He'd learned how to blend whiskey, and he also studied all of the theoretical kind of organic chemistry behind whiskey production. So a fairly busy guy. But he also managed to find time to fall in love with a Scottish lady named Rita. Now, this is Jessie Roberta Cowan, and she was actually the elder sister of one of Taketsuru's classmates. Now, the classmate invited Taketsuru over for afternoon tea, and he met Rita, and they got talking, they fell in love, and they decided that they were actually going to get married. They managed to do that all in 2 years. So quite a fast mover, Taketsuru. So their wedding anniversary was actually 100 years ago this year. So there's been a few celebrations earlier in the year up in Kirkintilloch, where Rita was from, and also all over Japan as well. So Rita and Taketsuru get married, and then they decide they're going to go back to Japan and kind of focus on Taketsuru's dream, which was to open Japan's first whiskey distillery. So when they get back to Japan, you know, the First World War's ended. The economy of Japan isn't great, as it was a fairly new economy. And Setsu Shuzo, the initial company, had decided they couldn't afford to build a distillery. Making whiskey is quite an expensive pastime. You have to buy all the equipment, get all the grains in, then you have to age the whiskey for a relatively long period of time. So it's a very difficult company to get into, a very different, difficult industry to get into. But luckily, Taketsuru found a gentleman named Shinjiro Tori. He is the person that started the Suntory company. So David was talking about him a little bit earlier. Now, Taketsuru and Shinjiro Tori decided they were going to partner together and open up Japan's first ever whiskey distillery. So Taketsuru signed a 10-year contract to be the general manager, distillery manager of the Yamazaki distillery in 1923. So that distillery opened. That was the first distillery in Japan. But after 10 years, Taketsuru and Shinjiro Tori decided that their ideas about whiskey were, a little bit different. Taketsuru wanted to be very traditional and very Scottish in his style. Shinjiro Tori and Suntory, they wanted to make a whiskey a bit more suitable for the Japanese palate. So they decided to part ways. And then Taketsuru went all the way up to the north of Japan, to Hokkaido. You can see this little yellow mark here. And that was the Yoichi distillery. So that was the first Nika distillery that was established. And that was in 1934. Now, Yoichi produces a really big, bold, quite oily single malt, similar to that Hazelburn or Campbellton. And that was what Taketsuru made for 35 years. But he realized that he needed another source of malt whiskey to really create a much more kind of complex and elegant blend. So he decided to try and find a new distillery. And he found this site just on the Nikawa and Hirose rivers. And he chose this site for the Miyagi-Kyo distillery. So it's just a little bit outside of Sendai in the Miyagi prefecture. And it was chosen partly because of the amazing water source that was there. So the Nikawa River and the Hirose River, very, very pure, clean water coming down from the mountains. And also the two rivers meeting creates a sort of microclimate where you get a lot of humidity, and that can help reduce the angel share a little bit. So the angel share is only around 2%. So the Miyagi-Kyo that we've got here, it is a single malt whiskey from the Miyagi-Kyo distillery. So for me, this whiskey is kind of the polar opposite of the Yoichi. So if anyone was in the World Whiskey Tasting last night with Steph and you tasted the Yoichi, this is kind of like the sibling. So the idea with Japanese whiskey is to try and create as many different distillates at the distillery as possible for blending. So when we talk about blending, one of the key things you need is quite a lot of different whiskies to create a really interesting blend. Now in Scotland, the blenders had it quite easy. There was 150 or so distilleries, so you'd have a little bit of this one, a little bit of this one, a little bit of that one, and these distillers were more than happy to sell the whiskey. In Japan, at this time, there's very few distilleries. There's only sort of one, and then there was two, and then there was 3 or 4. But these distilleries didn't really share casks. They were geographically very, very far away, and also there was much more kind of secrecy with everything in Japan too. So at Nika, very similar to at Suntory, the goal with the single malt distilleries is to produce lots and lots of different distillates and lots of different styles. So I've got a really nice diagram here that kind of shows you a recipe of a single malt. Now, if we look at most distilleries in Scotland, these distilleries will tend to produce one type of liquid. That's not true of all, but most distilleries have their house style. And to do that, you follow the same recipe. So at the malting stage, you would take the same level of peat in the barley. Fermentation, use the same yeast at the same time. Distillation, you keep everything the same, and you create what becomes your new make and your house style. So in Scotland, a lot of the diversity of the whiskey from the distillery is to do with what wood you put it into and how long it's in there for. Now, in Japan, they needed more variety because they didn't have as many distilleries. So at each stage of this process, at Nika, they use 4 different peat levels. So that's 4 different types of whiskey. I was speaking to Amiko from Nika last week, and she was saying that there's up to 10 different yeast varieties and yeast strains that are in use at Nika. So you can blend all of those together and create even more. Different cut points on the stills and different still shapes allow you to create even more different styles of whiskey. So this is kind of one of the key differences between a Japanese whiskey and a Scottish single malt. So the single malt we've got here is the non-age statement single malt from the Miyagi-Kyo distillery. Now, Miyagi-Kyo was designed to be the opposite of Yoichi. So it's a much more delicate style of distillate. It's using much, much larger pot stills than you can find in Yoichi. So we've got that kind of comparison here. Now, Miyagi-Kyo is also much more modern. Now, everything at Miyagi-Kyo is much more precise. So it's indirect steam heated stills. So it means that the distillation can be done and controlled very, very precisely. Also, the shape of the still, I kind of think of pot stills as obstacle courses for the vapor. The harder it is for the vapor to escape, the more lighter and fruity your spirit is going to be. In a pot still like Yoichi, there's not that many obstacles. So a lot of the sort of heavier esters and aromas can come up and get condensed in the still. And also, you don't really break them down very much. When we're talking about Miyagi Kyo, you can see there's a little boil ball in the middle of the still. It's got an ascending line arm. And also the condenser here is a shell and tube. So there's a lot more work to be done by that vapor for it to get out and crawl out of the still, which means that it's going to have a much more, it has a lot more copper interaction. And so we're going to have a lighter and fruitier spirit. So what we've got here, the Miyagi Kyo, it's mostly sherry cask maturation. It is a single malt, so it's 100% malted barley. The barley comes from Europe. It's mostly unpeated barley in here. And then it's the sherry cask maturation that we're really looking for in this whiskey. Lion's share of this will be 10 to 15 years old. There will be some slightly younger and also some slightly older whiskies in there. 45% ABV. And for me, this is reminiscent of quite a 1970s Speyside style whiskey. It's really elegant. It's really rich. It's got this really nice kind of sherry nutty note, but without having too much sherry. On the palate, it's got all of those really nice green, grassy herbal notes with a really nice touch of honey as well. Perfect timing, Eddie. I think you're muted, Eddie.
There's bloody Joe laughing at me in the background. Sod on.
So this is the one part of the taste that was fraught with technical errors on yours and my side. I feel less guilty now.
Yeah, that's all right. I've got broad shoulders like you, my friend, so it's fine. We can take it. You don't need me to tell you how superb this is. I mean, I'm looking forward to all of the whiskies. Miyagi Kyo probably came to later than Yoichi, which is the kind of show pony, if you like. I think Miyagi Kyo is perhaps overlooked a little bit, but it's just superb, isn't it?
I think it's exactly, when someone says to me, what's my ideal Japanese whiskey, I always think of something like Miyagi Kyo. I always think it's a very, very elegant style of whiskey. It has this beautiful balance, but also complexity and the depth of flavor you get, and you can just keep coming back to it and back to it. For me, it's superb.
And am I right in saying, and I'm sorry if I missed this during your presentation, but even Miyagi Kyo is slightly peated, is it not?
So at both distilleries, you will have unpeated, lightly peated, medium peated, heavily peated distillates. It just tends to be that Miyagi Kyo lends itself more to the unpeated style and you use a lot more of that, whereas Yoichi, it's more of the heavily peated style. But there is all of those different types in both single malts.
Yes. It's very interesting. Very interesting. I think we'd be right in saying that the Japanese kind of invented this very unorthodox and innovative way of experimenting with different weights of spirits, which has ironically influenced a lot of the more modern Scottish distilleries and English and Welsh and so on. This confounding this myth that you can only make one style of whiskey at each distillery.
That's it. And I think it's very much, it was born out of necessity. So, these days we talk about it as this amazing innovation. But the reason it was done is because, Shinjiro Tori and Taketsuru, they wanted to have all of these different flavors. So they had to come up with a way to adapt it. In Scotland, it wasn't necessary to do that because, your mate around the corner made peaty whiskey. Your other mate made like a Speyside sherry style. Then you'd have someone else who was making you grain. So you could just kind of borrow it all, whereas that didn't exist in Japan.
Yes, that's right. Brilliant. Anyway, we could talk about this all day, as we could about any of the whiskies that we're going to be tasting. But Nathan, for now, I'm going to consign you to the bin. I mean, the waiting area.
Before my internet cocks out again.
Yeah, exactly. But thanks so much for that, Nathan.
No, thank you for having me.
Really pleased we got you back.
Thanks, Eddie.
Cheers. Okay, so that was a pretty good start to the tasting. I hope you'll agree, ladies and gents. Apologies once again for the technical errors, but as I said, the hazards of online tastings. it really does test some people's Wi-Fi to the max, but we did get through it, and it was fascinating and delicious. Okay, we're going to move on to Taiwanese whiskey now, Kavalan, which many of you will have tried, some of you perhaps haven't tried before, and we're going to bring Steph back in, who is our Kavalan specialist for the day. Oh, where's she gone? There she is. Hi, Steph. How you doing?
Very good, thank you.
Good.
Promise my internet won't cut it out either, but I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed.
Your signal looks pretty good, to be fair.
Yeah, as long as my bloke in the other room isn't streaming anything, we'll be all right. I've told him to sit and read a book.
Isn't playing Mario Kart or something?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's Assassin's Creed at the moment. I don't know what's.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Right.
But yes, hi.
Hi. So we're going to talk about the Kavalan Sherry Oak.
Yes.
I'm going to let you crack on. And would you like me to pop your presentation up at the same time?
Yes, please, my love. I like the maps.
Right. Well, I will do that for you.
Right, just getting my whiskey. Thanks, Eddie. Sorry, I cut him off there. So just showing you a few pictures, a bit of map as well. So just in case people aren't sure where Taiwan is, it's this island just off the coast of China. We do get a lot of confusion with Thailand, hence the insistence on me providing a map. So Taiwan has a really interesting history. And I kind of joke a little bit about both Japan and Taiwan and Britain, whiskey producing nations, as, we're all islands off a mainland where the people from the mainland have for centuries been trying to come over and take over the islands. So I feel like there's a bit of a sort of whiskey making mindset to those sort of ever embattled people. But the interesting thing about Taiwan and Kavalan is the first single malt distillery, single malt produced in Taiwan. And this only happened quite recently. And that's because Taiwan was under a monopoly system for producing alcohol until 2002. And in 2002, they joined the World Trade Organization. And as part of that, they had to sort of loosen up some of their restrictions on their monopolies. And so suddenly independent companies were allowed to produce alcohol. This attracted the attention very quickly of a guy called Mr. Lee, and he owns a company called King Car Company. And it's one of Taiwan's biggest food and drink producing companies. And they also do, a bunch of other kind of businesses as well. They do cleaning products and orchids and all kinds of stuff. And he had been wanting, as a big single malt fan, to make single malt for years, for 20 years. And obviously, like I say, it had been illegal the whole time. So as soon as this law was relaxed, he straight away sort of kickstarted his plan into motion. And he engaged a few consultants from the whiskey industry to help him put these plans into place, and also engaged some kind of Taiwanese people who were experts in the food and drink area so that they could get this project going. So they did actually have the late Dr. Jim Swan involved very, very heavily from the start, and he sort of helped them select all the equipment and set up the distillery as well. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the climate and things in Taiwan, though, because I'm not sure if you can see from the map, but it was, I should go back to it while I talk about it. It's actually on the Tropic of Cancer. So it is tropical, the bottom half of the island, and the north half of the island is subtropical. So it's a very, very different climate compared to, say, Scotland or Ireland, if we're talking about traditional homes of whiskey production. And that will have a big impact on the flavour that we'll get to in a wee sec. So some background information on Taiwan as well. I always compare things to Scotland because I'm part Scottish. And so it's about a third the size of Scotland, but with about 4 times the population. So quite often when I'm thinking of Taiwan, I think of big built-up cities, a huge metropolis, lots of neon lights and busy sort of street markets and things. That's exactly what the left-hand side of the country is like, but the right-hand side of the country is actually much more kind of green and foresty and lush. And this is where they decided to build a distillery. I'm not sure if anyone else is a child of the 80s as well, like I am, but also, the bottom of almost every one of my toys when I was a child sort of said made in Taiwan as well. So kind of get the idea that they're very good at making things. So like I said, the sort of eastern side of the country is much more green and has cleaner air, much less pollution, and but very pure water. And the guys at Kavalan chose a valley in the northeastern area called the Yilan province. And it has got the cleanest air in Taiwan. And as you can see there, I've put down some sort of temperature guidances, 14 degrees C in the coldest night of winter, which is obviously, a Scottish summer's day. So this does have a big impact on how the whiskey ages. But the humidity is actually very similar to Scotland. What you also get because of its position is in the winter, there is a sort of wind that comes out of the east of Siberia and then cycles around the ocean there on the right-hand side and ends up sort of pointing itself right at that northeastern corner of Taiwan. So you will get a bit of a chilly breeze for Taiwan in that area in the nights in winter. So again, it helping increase the sort of temperature fluctuation. So the distillery, they actually started after all their planning. They started constructing it in 2005 and finished it also in 2005, just 9 months later, which is basically unheard of in whiskey distillery building. And they distilled their first new make after testing out all the equipment on the 11th of March 2006. So they've been going for 19 years now. Heading into 14 years now, sorry, and heading into their 15th year next year. And like I say, it was the first single malt distillery in Taiwan. And you can see from that picture, as obviously, it's just at the edge of it's between two mountain ranges. It's the Snowy Mountains and the Central Mountain Range. That's where we get their water from. So nice little pocket there. To talk quickly about production, they don't grow that much barley in Taiwan. They do a little bit, but it is too warm. So they ship over most of their barley from Europe. Central Europe, Scandinavia, they'll get a little bit from Britain, and also some grown kind of in other areas like Australia, depending on supply and demand. The water, like I say, all comes from the Central Mountains and Snowy Mountain Ranges. There is snow on them occasionally in the winter, and I'll talk about the yeast in a second. So when they built their distillery, they had to, because of the heat and humidity, make it super clean, super easy to clean, and make sure there wasn't any risk of having kind of bacterial infections or wild yeast infiltrating any of the processes. And obviously that's much more likely to happen in a very, very hot place. So hence these are their fermentation tanks, which are all stainless steel. They actually use 2 yeasts though during fermentation, and this is again because of the heat. French yeast are much more suited to this higher temperature, this warmer temperature, and then they also use some South African yeast as well. They combine them, and the South African yeast is there to add a really fruity flavor to the distillate, and that's really the flavor that these guys are going for in their whiskies. They do also have to have water jackets to temperature control their fermentation tanks as well to make sure it doesn't get too hot and produce any bitter flavors. This is one of my favorite pictures. This is their original still house. So the stills are all made by Forsyths and were shipped over in pieces and then sort of stuck together at the distillery. They actually, when Kavalan was awarded Best Single Malt in the World at the World Whisky Awards in 2015, they got very excited. And so they decided to expand their distillery and built another couple of pairs of stills. Then the following year, when they won Best Single Cask Single Malt, they got even more excited and decided to take that up to 10 pairs of stills. So they're now capable of producing 9 million litres of pure alcohol per year, which it puts them in the top 10 of single malt distilleries in the world, which is very unexpected for a distillery that only started operating 14 years ago. But beautiful, beautiful stills. Just another little point about the heat there is that they actually have to have 2 condensers, because when you're trying to condense the vapor coming out of the still, it's so warm in that still room that quite a lot of it won't just naturally condense like it will do in Scotland in the lower temperatures. So they have to have a second condenser running at the same time, just to make sure that all the vapor is recondensed and captured. Oh, and that's a picture of it. Sorry, this is the ugly pictures that we took when we were there, rather than the nice marketing pictures that we've had in previous slides. And this is my actual favorite picture. So unlike Nika, Kavalan are actually making the same spirit every time, although what we're drinking is now all from the same spirit every time. They have started a few years ago experimenting with peated malted barley. So currently all Kavalans on the market are unpeated barley. And coming out, I think this year, there's one at the distillery already, is some whiskey made with peated barley. So unlike Nika, they're making the same spirit every time, so same fermentation time, same yeast strains. But what they do is then make a variety of flavors by putting using lots and lots of different cask types. So these guys have a ridiculous cask program. They buy the most expensive casks from all the top producers. They do visits to them multiple times each year to make sure they're getting the top quality, and they pay through the nose for it. But it's worth it. A good quality cask, obviously, is an essential part of making a excellent whiskey. The other thing that happens here is you've got the heat and humidity that I've mentioned quite a few times, and this is having a huge impact during aging. And so it is very, very fast. It's 3 to 4 times faster than it would be in Scotland. And so this means that's why Kavalan have achieved so much in such a short space of time. Usually a distillery that was 14 years old, would only have had a spirit out for, a few years potentially, and might not have really sort of got to grips with what they were doing yet, and taken part in all these awards, had all these different varieties available, whereas Kavalan has a huge range already, and like I say, has won best single malt in the world, etc., etc. So this is all part to do with everything aging so fast. Most of the whiskies that Kavalan release are between 4.5 and 9 years old. I have seen an 11-year-old one, and their first release that they put out was 3.5 years old, but they don't release anything that young anymore. They try and keep everything above 4, and usually 4.5 plus. But yeah, this picture really reminds me of Indiana Jones. It looks like the Ark of the Covenant is stored around the corner, I think. Awesome guy. Oh, we've lost the picture. Oh, it's okay. You're right, Eddie. Do I need to stop talking? You're still on mute.
For goodness sake, sorry. We're just running a wee bit tight on time, my dear. So.
All right, Han, no worries. So just to quickly chat about this one then particularly, this is a single cask varietal of Kavalan. So what they do have in their sort of standard range are ones that are combinations of a few different cask types, whereas this one is Oloroso sherry cask only. And the other thing that's pretty spectacular about it is that it's all first fill. So whenever Kavalan say a cask type on their label, they mean that it's guaranteed first fill. So I'm not sure everyone can see how rich the color of this whiskey is. It's pretty ridiculous. And the flavor is just as intense. And that's because it's 100% first fill in here. There's no finishing happening. There's no other type of casks going in this at all. So these are casks that were made in Spain and used for Oloroso sherry, and then shipped over to Taiwan and filled with their new make spirit. Aged there, like I say, 4.5 to 9-ish years, depending on the cask itself. And then they will have blended a few casks together for this one, watered it down to 46%, and then bottled it. So very, very intense on the sort of Christmas pudding notes, all your classic sort of sherry bomb flavors. But even some of the biggest sort of Scottish sherry bombs, they quite often are just, a bit of a cask finish, or they'll have second and third fill in there. So this one is almost the bombiest of the bombs, hey?
Yeah, I mean, it's a spectacular sherry cask, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely crazy.
Some of the guys here at the distillery have had a little taste of it, as well as the others, and they're having just released a sherry cask whiskey of their own. They're into sherry at the moment. So
yeah, I was at the distillery a couple of months ago, actually, at Spirit of Yorkshire. Had a brilliant tour and got to try some cask stuff. And delicious. Their Fino cask, I wanted to steal that one. There wasn't quite space in the car, but I would have rolled it into the car.
I'm sure we could have made room.
I know. Who needs clothes? Just chuck that one.
Let us know when you're next up.
Yeah.
Anyway, listen, that was absolutely gorgeous. I did have a question, but I've completely forgotten what it was now.
Yeah, sorry. I was talking very fast again. But if anyone has any questions, you can type them in, and I can see them. I can answer on YouTube, even if I'm not speaking.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's fine.
But we can always get you back in.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring in. I'm going to remove you now, if you don't mind.
No worries. Cheers.
Anupin, thank you so much, Steph. Thanks for being here. And we're going to bring in Anup, who is a new friend from Rampur Distillery. Let me just unmute you, Anup.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. And you're actually dialing in from India itself.
Yeah. So today we're testing Rampur double cask.
Okay, you take it away, Anup, and then we can have a chat about it.
Yeah. So the Rampur is a distillery. I'll take you through the production process, little bit about our company, and then the topography of the distillery. So Radico Khaitan Limited is a company. This 74 years. It was established in 1943. I'm sorry, and it is we just completed 75 years distilling last year, and we all this year we are distilling alcohol, that is neutral spirit from molasses and then grain. And we started distilling malt whiskey since 1993, almost more than 27 years. And we actually ventured into single malt in later stage. Actually, in fact, in 2016, we launched our first single malt. Rampur Radico Khaitan is one of the largest Indian company in India, and in IMFL, Indian made foreign liquors. But we started our malt distilling. We have a connection with Scottish distillery. In fact, our distillery, malt distillery, was designed by famous Scottish guy called MacBain in '92, and then subsequently we had many joint ventures with Scottish company, and just a minute. And we in fact had many joint ventures, 3 joint ventures with Scottish company, and we distilled our Rampur single malt since 93, almost more than 27 years. So Rampur is the distillery is situated in northern part of India, which is foothills of Himalayas. The climatic condition at Rampur, in winter it goes down to 2 degrees centigrade, and in summer it goes up to 45, 46. And the malt we use from northern Indian 6-row barley. In each process, the flavor contributes to the Rampur single malt. Each process we have a 6-row Indian malted barley which contribute to the brown malty character, which is biscuity, and then we have a unique combination of different yeast during fermentation. That is the 3 different yeasts. So one yeast contributes to the fruity character, the other one is contributing to the oily character, and the third one contributes to the overall fruity floral character. So there is a very unique. We did lot of experiments to come up with this unique combination. Then we have a traditional copper pot still, wash still and spirit still, exactly like anywhere in the world. So but the difference is we have a wash still which is normally wash stills are bigger than spirit still. We have a smaller pot wash still and bigger spirit still. So what we do is we distill twice, 2 batches, and then distill 1 spirit distillation. So our wash still is 8,500 liter bulk liter, which is very small in capacity, and the line arm is ascending, and it is a normal traditional say pot still. So what we do is we get the low wine one, and then we have two batches of wash still distillate, and then we take our spirit still is 12,500 liters, and here what we do is we go very slow in distillation process, which is one of the slowest in the world, which is 4.5 liters per minute. And because when you slowing things down in distillation, actually it brings out a lot of distillery characters to the product. And if you see, Rampur has a lot of fruity characters from fatty esters, and we during distillation we try to retain those things, and the pot still the spirit still has a descending line on, and because it is the distillation is very slow, and there is big boiler. So the tracks during the distillation, lot of copper contact takes place. Because of that, our whiskey is less veggie, which is very less sulfur. There is at least almost no sulfur in our new whiskey. So lot of fruity characters, a lot of little bit of oily floral characters, and sweet malty characters. And we have a very good wood policy. So we because we produce around 1 million liters of new whiskey every year, and recently last year we increase our capacity to 2.5 million liters, which is almost more than double. And the wood policy, what I was talking about, we make sure that the single malt goes to all fast fill bourbon. That's we get all the tropical fruit, vanilla characters in Rampur, all expressions, which is the heart and soul of Rampur. Then talking about the Rampur climatic condition, it has greater impact on whiskey, because Rampur warehouse average temperature during winter is very low. Unlike India, is a huge country, and the topography, if you compare to north to south, it's completely different. So during winter, it has go down to 1 or 2 degrees centigrade, which is quite low, and in summer it goes up to 45, 46, which is very high for a whiskey maturation. So during maturation, a lot of contraction and expansion in the wood, which contributes to the maturation process, which is much more faster than anywhere in the world, because of lot of expansion and contraction inside the wood. What we get out of it is a lot of fruity characters, which is tropical, and let me just pour a little bit of this has got lot of tropical fruits, like lychee, banana, then ripe mango, which is, and it has got balsamic, vanilla character from American bourbon. So it has got, it's 2/3 of life in American bourbon cask and 1/3 of life in Oloroso Sherry cask. So it's a combination, beautiful combination between American oak and Sherry Oloroso European oak. So vanilla, fruity characters from American oak, and nutty honey, and a lot of dark dried fruits. Tobacco note from Oloroso Sherry. So while designing this single malt, we try to retain all the Rampur characteristic, the soul of Rampur, and at the same time, this we try to create a softer, Oloroso Sherry finish, no, Sherry matured. So overall, you'll see the sherry is not overpowering. It is quite very delicate balance between American bourbon and Oloroso Sherry cask.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. Thank you so much. Just out of curiosity, having never visited India myself in all these years, I'm determined to come over and visit.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome.
Yourself, but Ashok and the guys at Paul John as well. I'm just fascinated because obviously it's a vast country, and you're very high up in the north there. What is the difference? The kind of average temperature difference between yourselves and say Bangalore or where Paul John is. Forgive me.
Yeah. I can say that Bangalore is a beautiful part of India, and the climatic condition doesn't vary much actually. The whole throughout the year, temperature remain within the certain. It never go down below 15-14 degrees centigrade. And Goa is a tropical country, tropical state, and the temperature, the mid temperature is not very high, not very low, but in Rampur, the temperature goes down. Like winter is very chilly. In fact, it sometimes go down to 1 degree centigrade in the winter, peak winter, and in summer it goes up to the 45, 46, which is quite high. And because of that, and we use only fast fill bourbon for our all single malts expression. So we get lot of beautiful characters during, though all our expressions are non-noise statement, and we don't use any peated malt for our whiskey. So it is beautiful fruity all throughout. Tropical fruits, and then the little twist in particularly we have first we launched in 2015, that is select all American fast fill bourbon. In 2016 we launched our PX, which is Pedro Jimenez cask, which is that is finished in Pedro Jimenez cask. And last year we launched Rampur double cask and signature reserve, with the oldest malt from India. We filled at 63.5%, and while bottling, it was 43.9. The margin, the ABV drop, it is almost. And this year, this month, we launched another expression which is very fast in the world. And single malt finished in Indian Cabernet Sauvignon wine barrel. So we are doing lot of interesting stuff. And there are lot of different casks in our possession. So in near future we'll be showcasing those products, which is quite interesting, and maybe something new to the world. So like Indian cask.
Great. Well, Anna, that's I think you're the only whiskey in this panel that I've never tasted before, so really very happy to taste it. Thank you for providing it to us and for giving us so much information. We could go on and on because I'm really fascinated to hear more about Rampur, but I'm afraid we do need to move on. But thank you anyway, and we'll hopefully come back to you in a little while, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. There's never enough time with these things, but we do need to keep things motoring on. So I'm going to bring in Shilton, who has been waiting patiently. Not sure if he's been dancing away. There he, he weren't. If you weren't dancing, you are now.
I am now. Hi, Eddie.
Hey, Shilton, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you guys doing? All well? Lovely show so far.
Thank you very much. Well, it's even better now that you're here. Now, listen, you've provided us with the edited version of Paul John.
Yep.
Something I've remember from some years ago, but it's always nice to try it again. So I'm going to let you chat about Paul John and the edited, and then I'll come back in.
Sure. Thanks, Eddie. Hi, guys. So today we're trying out the Paul John edited. You can see the range behind me, the core range that we have, and a few limited editions as well. So Paul John, the distillery is based in Goa. I'll see if I can pull in the screen just to, if it works. I can't do that. I'm afraid. No. So Paul John, the distillery is based in Goa, on the west coast of India. The distillery is just about 5 kilometers away from the sea. So as Anup was mentioning before, Goa sees a tropical climate, so very hot and humid climates that we have. We're looking at temperatures from about 17 degrees, which we call as winter in December, and it shoots up to 35, 40 degrees in the month of May. At the same time, the humidity level is high. I mean, we're looking at 50, 60. I mean, in the month, I think in this May, it was even up to 90% humid. So that's where the distillery is based for us, tropical climates, hot and humid, and that tends to extract a lot of flavors from the wood in a short time. So the extraction rate is about 3 to 4 times higher compared to Scotland. The name Paul John itself, it's named after the chairman of the company, Mr. Paul P. John, who started the company in 1992. Till 2008, he set up the distillery in Goa, and 2009 is when we started distilling with Michael D'Souza, our chairman, our master distiller with the company. 2012 is when we launched the first single cask in the UK, which was sold in about 24 hours. And since then, we have the Brilliance, Edited, Bold in the flagships and the range. So what we have here is the Edited, which is lightly peated, as you can see on the nose. We get a slight hint of peat on it. Now, we use a 6-row barley. The barley comes from north of India, taken down to Goa, where it's been distilled and matured and bottled in Goa itself. So the barley that we use is a 6-row barley, and 6-row barley is very high on protein and low on carbohydrates. So you get a lot of oiliness, fruity character coming from the whiskey. We use American oak cask for edited, first fill and second fill American oak cask. For the peat, now we do not get peat in India. So to make the peated whiskey, we ship the peat from Scotland, take it to Goa, take it to India, and do the malting ourselves in India. We ship the peat from 2 different regions, Isla and the Highlands. Edited over here has got about 20% of peated whiskey in it, and the rest is unpeated whiskey, just because it gives you the right balance of the peat, and the peat doesn't take over the whiskey. It's a right easy drinking, an entry level for the peated whiskey, easy sipping whiskey. On the nose, you get a lot of malted barley, lemony notes on it, kind of a bit CVD character to it. But it's a young whiskey. Again, as I said, it's a young whiskey, but a lot. You see the color itself. You get this in just 5 and 6 years time. A lot fruitier. I get some mocha. This reminds me of. It's every time whenever I try the edited, I keep mentioning this. It reminds me of the after a chocolate that we get, like a chocolatey minty character coming in. On the finish is when you get when the peat coming in back to you. So it's not something which is aggressive straight away on your palate, but the peat comes in nice and gentle. It's the right balance. It's a well balanced peated whiskey, I will say, in one line. But drop it. Let us know what you think about it. We have, as I said, we are in Goa. We got the distillation. The capacity we do is about 1.2 million liters a year. And we are in about 39 countries. So we are also opened up recently the visitor center. I know Eddie was mentioning about visiting Goa. So Eddie, that's something which you should be coming in and seeing us at some point whenever you guys get in, when we are allowed back to travel. So we are more than open. We are open to welcome you guys and come over. So let me know what you think and any questions, guys, on the whiskey. If you want to ask us, feel free. About us, I know Eddie was mentioning about different regions and talking about different places. So all the 3 distilleries are different, in different regions. So we get different style of whiskeys. For us, it's tropical, hot and humid climate. As I said, 17 degrees is the lowest you could see, or 19.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's just fascinating. It's the first time I've tasted all 3 in one sitting. Well, I say that, but I don't actually have any of the Amrit, but we won't mention that again. I'm sure I will at some point. But yeah, it's fascinating to taste. I mean, I would say, and I've always said this about Paul John and particularly about the peated expressions, that they're almost as close to, particularly the slightly older cask strength stuff, I find to be as close to an older Islay, heavily peated Islay single malt that you'll ever come across. If you want old, really old, like 30, 40-year-old Islay, get single cask Paul John, slightly advanced age at about a tenth of the price.
Yeah, no, that's that every time we do a tasting, and especially with the bold or the edited, and you put it up in a tasting, blind tasting especially, a lot of guys will say the same thing, Eddie, and it takes people by surprise about the style of it. This is a good balanced peated whiskey. I mean, there is peat in it, but it's not. I love peated whiskeys myself, and this is the right, perfect amount of it. It's a good balance. It's not overpowering, but it comes to you. It just warms you up later. It just comes back to you after you sip it down. So that's something which is amazing about this.
Yeah, exactly. I've always been a fan of the peated Paul John. Well, in fact, the unpeated as well. But I just think there's something about the slightly peated and the heavily peated, which it just does very, very well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I mean, the peat level on this will be about 10 ppm, and considering the peat being shipped over from Scotland all the way to India, we lose a lot of phenols on the. I mean, it takes 3 months to reach into India as well. So there is a lot going on over there, and then it's not as heavy peated like any of your Islay style whiskies.
I wonder, it would be interesting because obviously in Scotland, when you're maturing peated whiskies, they lose X amount of phenol parts per million every year in the cask. You see that sort of dropping off.
Yeah,
which is why the younger Islay whiskies or younger peated Scottish whiskies tend to be much punchier, much peatier than the older stuff. How much do you know how much effect it has in Goa? Because I mean, obviously you see that increased speed of maturation, but is it the same effect on the phenols, or do we not know that yet?
Yeah. So as I said, I mean, the whiskey that we get will be at 35 ppm, the cask strength ones, for example. By the time it reaches, it takes 3 months, so you're losing a lot on it. When we do the malting, we also, with the peated whiskies, we tend to do it in the winter. Well, Indian winter. It's you're looking at about 17, 19 degrees Celsius and that kind of temperatures. So that is a time when we try to do it so that we kind of retain more. I mean, keep more of that fruitiness coming in and not using more of the peat.
Mm-hmm.
But again, as I said, the cask strength ones are at 35 ppm. That's the heaviest peated whiskey you will see in the Paul John range, and then you have this 10 ppm ish, that kind of light peated whiskey.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating, Shilton. Again, another person that I could talk to all day about these things, but
you need to. I mean, I was listening to you talking about visiting India, and you need to come and visit all the.
I know.
And make sure you finish off your trip in Goa. That's also Goa is also called as the party capital of India, Eddie. So that's.
I've heard this, and I think coming from you, I would call you a reliable source when it comes to party. Good stuff. All right. Well, listen. Thanks so much, Shilton. I'm gonna remove you from the stream just for now, but
Sure.
we'll bring you back at the end. Thank you. And
See you later. Thank you, Eddie.
Okay, so we're going to bring in a final presenter, a man I've known for many years, and his name is Ashok Chokalingam, and he is in Bangalore, and we are going to talk about Amrit. Good evening, Ashok. Oh, you're muted. Hold on. There we go.
Yeah. Good evening, Eddie. How are you?
Good evening. I'm very well. All the better for seeing you, old friend.
It's been a very long time indeed, and we go a long way back, I guess.
Absolutely. I was going back through some stuff the other day and trying to work out when we first started doing these whiskey dinners and tastings and then festivals, because you were there right at the beginning when we first started doing whiskey festivals.
That's right. The Black Friars in Newcastle is one of my favorite venue. I think, we won a lot of hearts in 2008, the first blind tasting that we have done.
That's right. And Amrit won a lot of friends that series for sure. But obviously things have moved on a lot. 12 years that is.
It is.
And you guys are kind of like the granddaddies of the Indian single malt industry. And the others won't mind me saying that. So obviously it'd be fascinating to hear, what any new developments or anything that's happening at Amrit, and obviously particularly about the Narangi whiskey that you've very kindly supplied for us. So I'll hand over to you for now, Ashok, and I'll come back to you in a few moments. Okay.
Sure. So just a quick recap of who we are and how we started the whole thing of single malt whiskey from India. So Amrit is a family-owned distillery established in 1948. That's like right after independence. We got independence, by the way, in 1947. So Amrit was started as a small blending and bottling unit. So at that time of inception, we were not actually producing anything. So the very first distillate we made was indeed rum, and it was in 1955. And then we started to distill grape brandy in 1974. The reason why we did grape brandy was there is a province called Pondicherry in south of India, which was a French colony. From that, the truffle effect is basically the south of India acquainted with a lot of brandy drinking culture as opposed to the whiskey. Whiskey was more on the north. So we started to produce grape brandy in 1974. And then in 1987, we started to distill our first malt whiskey. It was out of compulsion than out of intention. So until 87, we were importing malt whiskey in bulk from Scotland and used in our blended whiskey. At that point in time, in the import tariff of Scotch malt or any Scotch whiskey coming in India was in the tune of around 350%. It was far too high for us to use a lot of malt in the blend by way of importation. So in order to cut down the cost, the company decided to make its own malt whiskey, mainly to use the blended whiskey. So the effect of globalization is such, when India has opened its gate for the foreign players to come and play in the market, especially Diageo and Pernod Ricard came into the market, started to introduce blended whiskey with the light malt content, which basically changed the consumer preference in the market. So at some point in time, we were using close to 30 to 40% of malt in our blend, and then we were forced to cut it down because the consumers' preference have changed. So then we ended up with having a lot of malt that is matured, and we don't know what to do with that. So at that point in time, Ricky, our current managing director, was doing his MBA in Newcastle, and he took up a thesis, and the marketing project that he undertook was, what is the potential for single malt whiskey to be sold in the European Union? So at the end of the MBA course, we got the studies done, and then there was a niche market that we can try to basically tap in, and that's how the whole project started. So in 2004, we launched maybe India's first single malt into the global market. So I don't think anybody has tried to make an effort to sell malt whiskey from India into the global market. So that's where we started. And then, as you know, initially it was like very tough. And then I think, Eddie, you opened up the floodgate for us in a way, because if you remember that we did that India versus Scotland blind tasting series across 6 cities in the UK. And that basically gave us a lot of confidence that we have a good product. It's a question of convincing the consumer. And that's how we started. There we are today across 45 countries. And then we cannot produce enough of what we wanted to sell. So as a result, we have expanded our distillation capacity from 300,000 liters to 1 million liters today. Whereas Paul John and Rampur, they started big right from the day one. So we were not like that. We were kind of doing the reverse. We created demand and then producing more now. So at the moment, we are distilling close to 1 million liters of pure alcohol. And then we are also building new warehouses to accommodate more barrels for the future need. So that's where we are. So when it comes to production, it's very similar to what's been done in Scotland. So we use, as Shilton and Anup informed, we use majority of malted barley grown in the north of India, which is a 6-row barley. But we also bring peated barley from Scotland, made to our specification. We don't do the peating in India, especially in Bangalore, because of the climatic condition, which is not suitable to do malting. So these 2 barley varieties that we use, distillation style is a double pot still distillation, and then we use a variety of oak barrels, starting from virgin oak, ex-bourbon barrels, ex-Oloroso, Perez Jimenez, and port pipes. So these are all the oak varieties that we use, barrel varieties rather, we use for maturation. So when it comes to Narangi, I would say it is an out-of-the-box thinking whiskey. Amrut is known for that. So that is what our USP is. We offer something totally unexpected and an out-of-the-box thinking. So probably Narangi is the first whiskey ever produced with an influence of orangey flavor into the whiskey. So the word Narangi is a Hindi word, means orange, as simple as it is. So as you all aware, adding anything into the whiskey disqualify it to be called as whiskey. So you can call it as a liqueur. So what we did is we bought a full barrel of Oloroso sherry cask filled with Oloroso sherry from Spain, and then marinated the sherry with fresh orange peel. And then the orange peel that we have used come from south of Bangalore, where the distillery is a region called Markara. It has a very unique variety of orange. It's kind of like the skin is not exactly orange in color. Sometimes it's greenish and light and pale. So we got that, and then we put orange peel into the sherry cask, let the whole combination to mature for about 3 years. So what happens is, since sherry is in a range of like 20% ABV, and then when we put orange peel in it, so the orange oils basically leach into the sherry and then coated the inside surface of the barrel over the period of the 3 years. And then we have removed the sherry orange peel combo completely out of the barrel, drained everything out. Then we filled a 3.5-year-old matured single malt whiskey, which was matured in an ex-bourbon barrel, into what I call is an orange sherry cask. And then we have further matured it for a period of about further 3 years. So total age of the whiskey is about 6.5 years old in Indian climate, especially in Bangalore. We are quite different from Paul John and Rampur when it comes to the climatic condition. So the maximum we reach, it's about like 41 degrees Celsius during the summer. And then winter, the lowest that I have personally seen is about 9 degrees Celsius for about 2-3 hours in the early morning, from like, say 3 to 5 in the morning. And then we are back to 25, 26 during the day. So as Anup told, the barrels basically contract and expand during the night and day respectively. So that's going to put a lot of stress on the spirit that is being matured in the barrel. And then Bangalore is anyway unique because we are at an elevation of 3,000 feet above the sea. And then the relative humidity is very, very low. I think here around an average of 45 to 50% relative humidity is what you're talking about. So at times, like when people ask me, like, what's unique about Amrut? So I always tell them that we are a missing link between Scotland and Kentucky. The reason is the spirit is produced, including the mash bill, the same way as how the Scots do. But when it comes to the maturation, we lean more towards Kentucky because we get ethanol concentration in the barrel. That means every year the strength of the whiskey goes up. So, for example, we fill the barrel at 62.8, and over a period of 10 years, it will reach up to 71% ABV. The angel share is quite high compared to Scotland. We lose about somewhere in the range of 10 to 12% per year. But what it offers is a 10-year-old Amrut will be like par with 30 to 40 on a Scotch scale when it comes to the profile. And it's also going to be expensive to produce a 10-year-old Amrut because we would lose close to 65 to 70% to the angel. And then, although we gain the strength, but the quantum of liquid that is left in the barrel is like so less, and that's why it's expensive to produce. Even in the case of RNG, we have to do a lot of suckers, bringing the Oloroso sherry from Spain and then mature it with peel, orange peel, and then take it out and then put a whiskey. But so I have the whiskey with me here. It's funny enough, we just released this into Bangalore, or perhaps you can say in the Indian market for the first time. This was bottled about a week ago, the same at 50% ABV. Now, on the nose, straight away, I can say it's a kind of orange rind that sometimes you can see in Manhattan. I often joke at people, and you wanted to make a Manhattan, you can eliminate two components on your Manhattan. One is whiskey, so you have a whiskey, and then you don't need to put orange bitter. It's already there. So on the nose, it's orange rind and a nice hint of licorice, and then it's a spice dust, I would say, and then you see the effect of Oloroso sherry as well. It's like imagine orange peel inserted into the sherry, and then you add whiskey to it. It's like so. It's a whole combination, and also you have a nice layer of vanilla natural caramel. So all this is basically offers you a very complex nose, and then on the palate, your fourth taste is sweet, oily, coming from the sherry. Then it's a kind of toffee sweetness in the middle. Then you see that a similar feeling as if you have accidentally bite the orange peel. You have that spicy and refreshing feeling, exactly like what you have here. Eddie, you were silent.
I'm sorry. It just sounds so delicious, but unfortunately, I won't be tasting it just yet. Ashok, it's always lovely to hear from you, and to every time I listen to you, it just reminds me of the old days, and when bringing Amrit to the people of Newcastle to begin with. But it's good to see how much Amrit has evolved, and a lot of different innovative ideas that you've all been playing with, and it's just delightful to see the journey continuing and getting more and more exciting. We're going to go to a quick Q&A, including yourself, Ashok, where I'm going to ask a question of all of you. But thank you for now. I'm going to bring everyone back in. If I can. Okay. I'm going to ask everyone the same question for our viewers, which is a question I asked yesterday. Steph, I'm sorry, you probably answered the question already.
I'll think up something new. It's all right.
So I'm going to ask Ashok first, because you're the first on my screen. Is there anything that you are excited by that you see coming down the road whiskey-wise? So in terms of innovation or areas of the world that you think could be making great whiskey, or whatever it may be? Is there something that really kind of excites you?
So we have a couple of projects going on at the moment. I would say work in progress. I'm really hoping that one possibly would be released towards the tail end of the year next year. So for the Amrut fans who expect to have Amrut Spectrum, the Spectrum next release with a larger number is going to be on around July. So I was keep checking the barrels, and the problem is expectations on Amrut Spectrum is so high, and I need to do the justice. So I really don't want to be hurrying up. And so my prediction is it will be definitely ready next year. By the time it will be about 6.5 years old, I think that's a ideal timeline. And the other project that I was talking about is like it's very interesting project, Eddie. I would just basically stop it there rather than going and revealing the in-depth details of it. Okay. So always you have to have some element of surprise rather than breaking down everything today.
Okay. Well, you're very mysterious, like a Bond villain. Brilliant. Okay, thanks for that, Ashok. Nathan, you're next on my screen. Would you care to answer the same question?
Sure. I was doing the Japanese whiskey part today, so I'll kind of talk a little bit about Japan and what I see happening in the future. As everyone knows, the demand for Japanese whiskey has been far outstripping supply for the last sort of 10 years. But 20 years ago was when both Nika and Suntory started to try and increase production a little bit. So I think in the next sort of 5 years, we're going to start to see some age statements come back from both companies, and probably some more innovation as well. And there's obviously a huge amount of or lack of legislation on what Japanese whiskey is, but that's starting to be turned a little bit. So I think it's a really exciting decade for Japanese whiskey coming up.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Not beyond time. Okay, David, about yourself.
David, you're on mute.
You're still on mute.
Suntory point of view, we're seeing some interesting developments and stepping away from it being Scotch whiskey or Japanese whiskey. So two projects in particular, we launched Legion last year, which was a bourbon made by Fred No at the Beam Distilleries in Kentucky, but getting Shinji over from Suntory to Kentucky to select barrels to then transfer liquid to wine casks and sherry casks. So doing a different maturation with bourbon and then creating a step towards a world whiskey. And we've taken it a bit further now with the launch of Ale, or I'm going to pronounce it totally wrong, but where we are blending together Canadian, Japanese, American, Scotch whiskies, and why not? I think location and terroir are brilliant, but they sometimes are maybe just a bit limiting, and sometimes to go to the other extreme, sometimes to see what you can create when you take whiskies from all over the world is really interesting. So that's where I see some interesting things happening in the future.
Great, thank you for that, David. Very interesting. Shilton, you could sell.
Yeah. Well, to answer your question, Eddie, there is one thing which things have, what it was 10 years back and things have been changing is, which is very interesting to see how people consume as a consumer and enjoy their whiskies. We're talking about highballs today, and I'm sure Steph here and David as well will agree on highballs of how and for us in India as well. So how people approach to their liquid and not being kind of restricting yourself to how you enjoy, and people are changing. This is something interesting. For Asian whiskey as well, the way that the session is, how many times do we actually walk into a restaurant and see an Asian whiskey section on the menu? You don't find it. You see that as world whiskeys. But I would love to see something like that and see the change coming up. That's all about an approach of how you approach the whiskey and take it. It's not like keep it as world whiskies, but maybe even an Indian whiskey section. There are so many in the range itself for us now. So I think that's something which is very interesting to see changing in the future.
Yeah, so it's more about perception and perhaps further, not compartmentalizing, but giving India its own section. Obviously, Japan kind of has its own section, but it still gets lumped in occasionally with world whiskies. But yeah, I think I can see where you're coming from with that. Anup, is there anything that you see coming down the line? Any trends or innovations that you are excited about?
Yeah, we at Rampur actually, we are quite innovative when creating new style of whiskies. Though we are very new, only last 4 years we are in the market, but trust me, we have many things in the store. As on date, we have 14 different style of barrels, which is different barrels, and 4 or 5 more style in pipeline. So we are not in a stage to disclose, but definitely in near future we'll have something interesting from Rampur. Like just launched our Indian wine, which is first in the world. So there are a lot of things in the pipeline. So in near future we'll have something interesting to offer.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, we look forward to trying all of them, Anup, as they happen. And
Thank you so much.
thank you very much. Steph, last but definitely not least.
Yes. Well, so I mean, from a Cavalan point of view, like I was saying earlier, they've started distilling peated barley a few years ago, so we're starting to see that come out, and I can't wait to taste some of the first releases from that. The question of whether they're going to try and replicate their entire range of different cask type aging in peated as well, we're going to end up with 1,000 SKUs, which will make my house very full of whiskey, even more than it is now. But in a kind of global, trend thing, I think what's been great seeing the last few years and is continuing, and particularly now, I think obviously with this situation and lockdown and things, is just people's education level on how whiskey is made, how production methods affect flavor, actually knowing, a little bit more about all the things. I mean, when I first started doing whiskey, to sort of try and explain still shape to people was a bit baffling. There was a lot of, quite often, let's say, older people sort of sitting there still going on about, the water for ages, as if, it wasn't all filtered anyway. No one talked about barley, no one talked about yeast, no one talked about still shapes, or it was very rare to. And, they could talk about casks because that was simple, and they could talk about water because everyone knows what water is. But now we're seeing a whole new level of understanding and level of geekery, which is amazing. So I'm really enjoying that trend happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. Well, lots of different viewpoints there, and I'm sure that our viewers and watcher backers will have their own as well. But it's good to hear from people in the industry, from the coal face, as it were, telling us their views. Anyway, listen, it's been wonderful to have you all on. Thank you so much for being here, particularly to Anup and Ashok for dialing in from India. That's very much appreciated. I know it's quite late there now. But thank you once again. We're going to end the this broadcast now. We have another one starting in 19 minutes, if I can get my act together, which is the Independent Bottlers, Scotch Whisky Independent Bottlers tasting. So I will see you for that in about 19 minutes. But for now, thank you very much for watching. And thank you once again to my lovely guests and for the lovely whiskies you provided. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Eddie.
Thank
Good
you,
to see all of you.
Thanks, Eddie.
Goodbye, everyone.
Good to see Shelton, Steph, Nathan, David. I haven't met David, Anup, and all of you. Have a good time.
Lovely to see you all.
Pleasure to be. Bye.